I want to welcome you to our April Conservancy Day. We're really happy you can join us. The Friends have been sponsoring these monthly presentations for more than 10 years, and we are thrilled to have Janet Kane and Deb Turski presenting today. The research on the grassland birds in the Conservancy is very interesting. Before we start, I have a few comments and some technical points to make. I'm going to ask that everybody follow the Zoom etiquette that we've all learned this year. So if you wouldn't mind, except for Deb and Janet, turning off your video feed, and please stay muted. And we're going to use the chat area for comments and questions. And I should let everybody know that this presentation is being recorded. So as questions and comments occur to you, put them in the chat, and I will then make sure I bring them to Deb and Janet's attention at the end during the question and answer period. And I'll do my best to get to all of them. I am going to put some links in the chat that I'm referring to tonight. One of them is a feedback form. So I would love to hear what people have to say about Conservancy Day programs, what they like and what they don't like about them, and it would be great if you had suggestions about what you might like to hear about, and we could build a program. Let's see. So I should tell you a little bit about the Friends. I need to find out where I am. I can tell you about the Friends. The Friends are celebrating their 25th anniversary plus 1 year this year because of COVID. We had to cancel everything last year. Please keep an eye on our website and Facebook page for celebration events, and please come out and join us as, you know, pandemic allows. If you're not a member of the Friends, we urge you to join or to make a donation. Every dollar is needed and put to good use. Among other things, we advocate for the watershed, conduct education and outreach activities, and we have a major role in restoration of the land in the Conservancy. We're currently in year 2 of an ambitious Seed the Need campaign to raise $100,000 to create a platinum prairie in the new Acker parcel addition to the Conservancy. We are doing this in partnership with Dane County and the Clean Lakes Alliance and some other organizations. Please consider donating to this effort. A platinum prairie is comprised of more than 100 native plant species. This diversity helps restore the most robust prairie we can and provides a seed source for prairies all over Dane County. The link to donate to this effort is in the chat section. I'm going to put it there in a minute, and on our website. Conservancy days are held. There's some people, excuse me, that are not muted. If you would double check people who are watching that you are muted, I would appreciate it. Conservancy days are held the 3rd Thursday of the month from January to November. We have been virtual since last September, and you can see recordings of all of these on our YouTube channel. The link to that will be in the chat section too. You can see what our upcoming Conservancy days are for the year. We don't do them in December, but we hope that you will come out and join us for any of these. We're hoping that the June, July, and August events will be held in the Conservancy. I'm going to do a poll at the end of the presentation tonight because I'd like to find out what people think. If you would like to continue to do Zoom broadcasts of the Conservancy Day events when we get into the colder months, I'd like to know if you favor that over returning to doing them in person when we can do that. So I'll let you know when I start the poll. With all of that, I would like to turn things over to Janet Kane and Deb Turski. We are fortunate to have them presenting today. They are dedicated and valued volunteers with the friends. I'll let them introduce themselves, and I believe Janet is starting.
Mhm. Yep, thank you. So let's see. Oh, am I muted?
And I'm just going to remind everybody who's viewing to please turn off your video feeds.
So Anne, I'm not sure how this looks to everybody, but I'll just.
You're not sharing yet.
I'm not sharing.
No. Do you want to try it again?
I mean, I'm not, you're not seeing me at all?
Oh, I can see you. Yes. I didn't know if you were sharing slides at this point.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not sharing right now.
My apologies.
So, so I'm Janet Kane, and I'll say a few words of introduction, and then later Deb will tell a little bit about herself. But I have been involved with restoration activities at Pheasant Branch since the mid 1990s, when Dane County Parks acquired it. And I helped with many of the prairie plantings that are there. And when we planted them, we would talk about the birds and the insects and the animals and the turtles that would show up. And we had a really simple understanding of this. We thought if we make a prairie with native plant communities, this wildlife will come. So my confidence was shaken a few years ago when some birders approached the Friends Restoration and Management Committee to say that they had noticed some bird species declining in the Conservancy, especially of some species that nest in the prairie. And they also said that these declines seemed to be more noticeable at Pheasant Branch than at some other places in the area, like Pope Farm Conservancy and Holy Wisdom. And they were concerned that maybe the people visiting the Conservancy and letting their dogs run off leash were scaring away some of these grassland nesting birds. And my role in the Friends for many years has been on the Restoration and Management Committee, and some of us are out there a lot, several times a week. And I have to say, we had noticed more and more off-leash dogs. And people, some people with the off-leash dogs said they didn't know about the rules, but some just said that we didn't have any authority to require them to leash their dogs, which was true. But it didn't give us any leverage then for helping to solve this problem. So one of the first things the Friends did was to write articles in the local newspaper and in our own newsletter. We also, the Friends board created a task force of 7 board members to study the issue. And the task force made some recommendations to Dane County Parks. And the Friends also created this brochure, Dogs in the Pheasant Branch Conservancy, to help people understand what the rules are and the requirements for leashing. It's a little complicated for whatever we do there, because the Conservancy is really owned by 3 different interests. The prairies are in part owned by Dane County Parks, but also part of that is owned by the Wisconsin DNR. And then the bulk of the Conservancy to the north is owned by the city of Middleton. And the main trail goes through all 3 entities. So we need rules that are kind of consistent as you walk that trail. So Dane County Parks decided to take 3 actions. One was to increase publicity and enforcement of the leash requirements. One was to close many of the trails that had developed over the years that were just for pedestrians. Because these trails, just by being there and having a lot of people walk them, might have been a problem. And they also posted signs about grassland nesting birds so people would understand what was going on in the area. But the question was, did these things make any difference? Would we see any of these birds returning? And the Friends also sponsor a Master Naturalist course, and I'm one of the instructors in that. And we discussed the problem and the issues at Pheasant Branch. And some people in the course decided to step up and develop a system for giving us an answer about whether these made a difference. Deb Turski, who's presenting today, was one of those, and also Sherry Caves volunteered to address the issue. And Sherry's not able to be with us today, but she's still connected to the monitoring program. Then they had a pilot study, and several others in the class helped them with the pilot study that first year in 2019. So now I'm going to turn this over to Deb, who's going to tell you about the what they did.
And right before we go there, excuse me, but I want to recommend that people set their view to speaker view. I gave instructions on how to do that in the chat. That way, the person who's speaking ends up bigger on the screen. With that, I'll let you turn it over to Deb. Sorry about that.
No, that's good.
Thanks, Janet. So Sherry Caves and I, as part of the Master Naturalist class, were looking for a project that would involve our particular interest in birding. So learning from Janet about this immediate process that was actually already happening with the concerns about the dogs. And in the year 2019, when we were having our Master Naturalist class, there had already been the mitigating action of reducing the numbers of mowed paths through the prairie area. So there was that first change being done. What we defined as the steps that we needed to take to proceed with this project, as I've listed here and I'll detail with some other slides, was at first we wanted to establish by looking at data that indeed the target species, and I'll also list those particular species in a minute, had in fact decreased, because it was really kind of word of mouth, as Janet said, by some birders who had noted this. We also wanted to organize volunteers together with Sherry and me so that we could do a pilot monitoring during the season of 2019. And we needed to study, all of us, about the vocalizations and field marks so that we would appropriately identify these birds along with the other birds that we might see in our walks through the prairie. So we started then with our, just one second, let me get to, with our looking at leave. There are 650,000 plus birders who have contributed and continue on a daily basis contributing to this website, which was developed by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology in the 1990s. There are millions, I think some 70 million or more individual checklists, which each checklist is representation of the birds that are found in a particular location in a particular time by a birder. And we also are seeing data from 253 different countries and sub-regions throughout the world. So it's really quite a remarkable resource, which is available to anyone. And I will tell you at the end a little bit more about that, but anyone can set up an eBird account with simply their email at any time. And I think Janet is also going to mention her use of eBird for research on what she's interested in for Pheasant Branch. And even though she says she's not a birder, even though I think she is in a lot of ways, but she enjoys going in and seeing this information, which is very broad about habitat and nature throughout the world. In any event, this is a screenshot from one of the historical representations from, oops, sorry, I moved one forward, but basically using this material, we looked back at the records for Pheasant Branch. I also tried to look at, to assure about that comment about Pope Farm and Holy Wisdom, but there wasn't enough data really to make any comparisons. So that was simply, again, kind of hearsay. We also, as I mentioned, were going to use the eBird location to record our findings as we went forward with the project. And so this is just a sample, and actually it's only a partial sample because I couldn't get the whole thing on a screenshot. But when you make one of these walks, you put in the time and the day and the length of time and even the distance that you walk, and then you record each species that you see and try to approximate the numbers of individuals of that species. So this is the type of recording that we monitors are doing going forward as well. This is just to show you that graphing that old material from Pheasant Branch did indeed show that these species had decreased. These are only 5 of the 8 species because the other 3 didn't have enough data to make a graph, but that was just for assurance. So our piece of going forward with the monitoring certainly involved our wanting to get familiar with what traits we were going to be looking for in order to truly identify these birds, which tend to be, as a group, because they're grassland birds, rather secretive, several of them hiding really in the grass, and particularly their vocalizations are the only thing that one has for identifying them. Or in the case of a willow flycatcher, which is one of the birds, they look very similar to other species in their group called the ampid flycatchers, so that really it's their voice that makes the identification. So I'm going to show you little video clips just to give you an idea about the voices of these grassland birds, and you're going to find that the majority of them do not sing the way you think of cardinals and robins singing. They actually are described more as an insect-like sound. So here's first the willow flycatcher. The sound is when he throws his head back, that's when you're going to hear his sound. So you can tell that with these audio recordings, there's not only other birds in the background, but they're, in that case, planes too. But his little sound is described as saying Fitzbew. Birders use these mnemonics to try to incorporate the sound. Some are good and others are, not that helpful. So here's the sedge wren. Said to sound like an old rotary phone. Dick Kissel. He, when he sings, will come out and be seen on top of something, so that makes it a little easier. Here's one that actually is a very lovely song, which you may hear in the Prairie at Pheasant Branch. Said to sound like spring of the year. Definitely not a song sparrow sound. Similarly, the grasshopper sparrow sounds like an insect. This is a pretty one, Vesper sparrow. And finally, Mr. Hiccup. So in our first season, a pilot study, we did record a number of times the presence of willow flycatcher and sedge wren. And we did have 3 recordings of the Vesper sparrow. I think it was all in 1 week, 3 different evenings with 3 different monitors finding them. So what we wanted to do after the pilot season was to make a plan for the 2020 full season. And along that line, we recruited additional monitors for a total of 13. And we also looked at the paths that we were taking through the Conservancy. We had, in our pilot study, gone on the regular paths that others do, but we wanted to be sure that we were getting close enough to see whether these kinds of sounds, for example, were being lost from being too far away. So we did get permission to go off of the official tracks while wearing a sort of neon yellow county vest, which I have a picture of, I'll show you later. At that time, we decided to do 3 mornings and 2 evenings a week for the season of May 15th through September 15th. And as Janet will tell us more about, we also wanted to continue to develop our plan according to finding more out about the habitat needs of our target birds. In 2020, our target findings, by far the most exciting thing that we found, and given that it's only our first full year, was that our monitoring group found eastern meadowlarks not only present, but actually nesting in the prairie. First encounter was one of our group was scolded quite seriously by the adult eastern meadowlarks, which is typical behavior if one gets near a nesting area. And then in following times, even taking care not to go anywhere near where they were scolding, both adults and fledglings were actually observed. And then, of course, we tried to not disturb them in any way by going anywhere near them. But that was a very exciting development because as far as our history had been, nesting of eastern meadowlarks had not been seen for years in the prairie. We also saw an increased number of willow flycatchers recorded. The sedge wrens were the same, and we had single reports of Dickkissel and Henslow's sparrows. So whether that was just they're coming through or they live nearby, or it's hard to know, but nonetheless, it made for exciting times. So as we approach all of this and what we're looking towards, and Janet will expound on, is that we know that our target birds are habitat specialists, but I want to point out for just the casual observer, not necessarily particularly out there for the birds, but you're just walking around in the Conservancy, you'll see yourself that birds, the common birds, are picking places that they prefer to be. So when you're looking around in the western area from Fredericks Hill, that's where you're bound to see the red-winged blackbirds at the tops of many reeds, and you'll hear and then occasionally see the song sparrows doing their little thing where they are also very much wanting to be in the grassland in general, although both of these birds will go to tops of trees because they are more generalists than our birds. And in a similar sort of way, even though we know that robins and chickadees are ubiquitous, they prefer, of course, to be around in trees, and you're going to find them in the Conservancy more in the treed areas such as around Fredericks Hill. And here, of course, a woodpecker, this is a downy, is going to have to be around some trees. And if you go down to the springs, you'll often see the finches, particularly American goldfinch, enjoying a bath or a sip in the water there. And they like to hang out in those willows and other trees around that area. Our target birds, on the other hand, are not generalists picking things that they prefer, but they actually have to have certain aspects. And those are the features that we're also interested in as we're going forward on the project. So right now I'm going to turn back to Janet to have her elaborate on our findings in that regard.
And excuse me, again, I just wanted to give a time check to you guys. It's 7:03.
Okay. So hello again. So while this first year of monitoring was going on, there were two other main things happening. Yeah. So these photos are, I just grabbed them from a video put together by Gary Sater and Dale Kluberton. So you can see I think it's 6 minutes on the Pheasant Branch website. But Gary took photos from the same spot through a whole year. And so you can, this in the upper left corner is spring, and then the upper right is summer, and the lower right is fall, and the lower left is winter. You can see the landscape change. But this sort of tells you the area that we were monitoring, plus from the main trail to the trail along the boundary. So it was a relatively small area of the Conservancy. But the exciting news was that Dane County purchased the farm north of the Conservancy in 2019, adding 160 acres. Now, they bought it primarily out of concern for water quality, because the slope of the land, it's downhill from Balzer Road down to the county park, or down to Lake Mendota. And so that's the direction of rainfall. We were excited though, because we could imagine this would let us expand prairies into the new area. And if you look, this is an old map, but it still shows the buildings on the farm and the fields. And then below it is the Dane County area. And then much lower is the part that's in the city of Middleton. But there's a potential for up to 1.5 miles of prairie from the wetland to Balzer Road, and 0.5 mile from Pheasant Branch Road over to the housing developments. So that offered the potential for a lot of new habitat. This shows, this is from a Dane County Parks newsletter, and shows you some of the early construction on the new parcel. The buildings and the concrete structures were pulverized and used to make a new parking lot and at the entrance to the parcel. And basins and berms were constructed for stormwater control. Here's a map, a concept map from Dane County Parks of what the new property will look like with wetlands in the middle, surrounded by parcels of prairie. And this first parcel, I don't know if if you can see the arrow here, but on the 2020, that area was planted, was seeded in March of this year, or sorry, in winter. There was still snow on the ground. It was in March, but it was still snow on the ground. And those seeds were purchased with funds raised in the Seed the Need campaign. And we were shooting for at least 100 species for the seeding. We actually ended up with 178 species to seed that area. So it's going to be an amazing collection of plants. And then next will be the southwest quadrant. And fundraising for that has already started. And Anne mentioned how to donate if you'd like to. There's a link on the Friends website. Here's a picture of quite a beautiful prairie area. Oh, I should also mention that some of these seeds were, some of the seeds that were used were harvested from different sites around Dane County by volunteers this fall. And so if you would like to help, watch for seed collecting opportunities in late summer and early fall of next year. The other thing that was happening is we organized a bird habitat study group that had 4 of the people who are monitoring and 2 people from the Restoration and Management Committee. And this happened because the monitors were saying, well, do we really have habitat for these 8 species? Would we expect them all to be here? So one of the first things we did was to compile detailed information about habitat. And we sort of challenged ourselves, like, which did we think was the most likely or least likely to show up? And the meadowlark, we thought, was the most promising. And it came this year, which was fantastic. And the Vesper sparrow, we thought we really didn't have a lot of that habitat that sparrow would like. So, and from what we can tell from past records, the Vesper sparrows that do show up are migrants, and they don't stay for the summer and nest. But in learning about habitat, it's very complicated. And 3 important levels are: 1, the landscape. And that just means, like, if you were a bird flying in and you were looking all around, how would the landscape look to you? You know, is it a stretch of prairie as far as you can see? Is it a mix of prairie and forested areas? Is it housing developments? Is it city streets? Just how does that look? And that's an important consideration for birds. And then the next is another level is the parcel, like the particular place, which is mostly an invention of humans. I don't think birds necessarily think about these parcels, but for birds, the consideration is habitat fragmentation or continuous habitat. Like, does it look like it's the same thing, or does it shift, like even from prairie to woodland, or prairie to village, or is there an area with prairie and then a wooded area and then another prairie? Is it a lot of small pieces? So that's important for the birds. And different birds have different preferences. And then there's the exact spot, like where you're going to nest. The bird's going to nest. What's the structure of the vegetation there? And different birds have different preferences. It's sort of like, you know, if you're buying a house, the vegetation structure could be the house, the parcel could be the neighborhood, and the landscape could be the community. But all of those are factors for birds as well as people. We also interviewed experts from the UW and area organizations. And we had planned to visit some sites where birds that aren't at Pheasant Branch are seen more often, so that we could get a sense of where they are living these days. But we weren't able to do that because of the coronavirus, though some individuals did visit some sites. I love this graph because it puts together so many things that we learned about. And if you look on the left side, it talks about litter layer. Like some birds, like the Vesper sparrow is down in the left corner. They like almost bare ground with a few plants growing. Whereas Henslow sparrows the Vesper sparrows in the right, in the left, the Henslow sparrows in the right. The Henslow sparrow likes a lot of litter or chaff that they can nest in. The bottom talks about the vegetation density, short or tall. And in part that's related to soil moisture. Like if there's not much moisture, the plants are shorter. And if there's a lot of moisture, they're taller. If you have cattle or bison, goats, grazing can be a factor too for short or tall plants. Another part is the fragmentation. And if you have like 100 acres that's continuous, you would have more birds and more species of birds than if you had 5 20-acre parcels and you added up everything together. So a continuous habitat helps with attracting birds. And some grassland birds don't like to have a lot of traffic nearby. Others are more tolerant of that. So this committee made recommendations to Dane County Parks because we saw this new property developing and we wanted to give voice to what these birds that are declining because of habitat loss, what they would need to nest at Pheasant Branch. So one was to maximize the size of the habitats, position trails along the edge, and the edge means from when one kind of habitat switches to another. So even between a prairie and a woodland, that would be an edge. We also thought there were opportunities for adding habitat like short grass areas for the Vesper sparrow, having some shrubs in some areas, shrubs with wildlife value, because some birds like to have shrubs nearby to look out over the area. And also expanding the oak savanna. We have a really nice oak savanna on the top of the hill, and there's not much of that habitat these days. So expanding the oak savanna would be a good use of the new property too. The fire return intervals is a way to manage the litter levels, and that to just think about how often we burn areas. The results from the bird habitat study group are also used in the restoration and management committee. And one of the things our land manager, Rob Schubert, has a new propagation garden near the homestead site. And he's growing some short prairie grasses that aren't very common in our prairies, so that he can establish some areas of shorter prairie grasses. they've also decided to keep some of the native shrubs along the fence line at the back of the hill, because there are birds that routinely come and nest in that area. And we're hopeful that the county will be open to establishing more shrubs with wildlife value. Right now, they're very busy clearing shrubs out, but most of those shrubs are honeysuckle and buckthorn, so they don't really have wildlife value. The burn intervals are important, and the big question about what are we managing for, I'd say through the first 25 years, we really have been primarily managing for plant communities. And maybe we should think about incorporating some of the birds and insects and other wildlife. I have another section here, and I don't, in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of skip over it. Oh, don't know how to go backwards. Let's see if I can go backwards. I just wanted to give a tribute to the birders, because these are 4 of the birds, and I would never be able to tell them apart. I mean, it's one thing to have them on flashcards, but when you're out there in the real world and there's birds singing all over, and one of these catch your eye, it's like, what was that? But the bird monitors, some of them came with the skills for IDing these birds. Others of them really practiced a lot. So we could feel confident that if one of these species were out there, they would notice them. So bird populations in a specific location can vary a lot from year to year. So even though we had 89 checklists from 2020, really all that is just 1 year's data. So 2021 will have a second year, and we hope to continue for 4 or 5 years so that we can see if any of these birds are returning. All right, back to you, Deb.
Okay. Wow, that was fantastic. I'm really impressed.
Deb has 2 more things.
Oh, Deb does. Okay.
Sorry. It's really just a wrap up to say about what our coming season plan is based on the information that we've gathered over the past year, and also seeing how it went with our last season. So this coming year, and this is going to be from April 18th through September 8th, we'll have 9 monitors. It's actually 12 people, because there are couples who are also walking together. We're going to do 4 tracks per week, and we are going to extend our tracks into the new Prairie area, the newly planted area that Janet was just referring to. This is a photograph of the status of that area as of, I think it was 3 weeks ago when Janet and I were out walking here. This is a view from the north side of Frederick Hill into that south east quadrant of the Acker property. This grayer looking area is all of the newly planted prairie. So we're anticipating that the plants there will be really in a small stage this year, probably knee high or less, but we will be tracking into that area with our little yellow vests on, because importantly, we want people who see us off track to understand that we're there in an official capacity with the county's permission. So meanwhile, we're also looking to possibly add information about our project to the kiosks that are in the Conservancy. So that's one of our plans for this year. And we also are very interested in any opportunities to advocate for bird habitat, which include any opportunities that come up within the Friends structure or connections within the Friends, or where the board connects with the Dane County Naturalists or others. And generally take an opportunity to say what we have learned and what we know about what conservation is for these species in our area. One point would be, as trails have not yet been made into the new property, where such trails might go and how that might affect the habitat parcel piece that Janet was just referring to. So those kinds of opportunities, and frankly, anyone who's watching or interested, if you have ideas about how we might do that, we'd be very interested in proceeding with that too, and learning about it and engaging anyone who is also interested with us. So with that, I do have references, resources. I would mainly want to point out that if you go to eBird.org, you could see any and all of that magnificent material from all around the world and within our own Conservancy. This Madison Audubon tutorial is a 1-hour YouTube presentation by Kyle Lindemer of Madison Audubon Society, which just within the first few minutes would give you a good feeling for what you could set up for yourself in a program for that, for using eBird. And the others are if people are interested. But I think we're ready for questions now.
Okay, excellent. That was great. And I'm gonna share my screen and go back one. We advanced too far here. Let's see. How do I go back? Okay, well, I had some great graphics, but I am still figuring my way through Zoom and mixing it with PowerPoint. So I'll keep working on that, but let's get some questions going. We have a number of things. Somebody asked if
unlikely with the way that it's been managed in the property for us to see bobolinks. They like a very particular grassland, and it's if you look out to the Madison Audubon Society, there are opportunities to see bobolinks over in the Middleton Airport area because of the way that the hay structure and the preservation of the land before they do early haying. The other place that I've seen them is the Hauser Prairie, which is a prairie enthusiast parcel up in the Wanakee area. I think it's possible that we could get bobolinks in the future, but I don't think we're expecting that.
Okay. The next question sort of veered from grassland birds, and but it's a good one because lots of people are curious about the nesting eagles. And there was a response back and forth in the chat saying that the eagles have eggs and they are incubating them, and which is they've gotten further than they did last year, where they didn't have eggs that they could successfully incubate. And Hopefully they'll hatch in a couple of weeks. And Madison Audubon is actively monitoring that nest, if people didn't know that. And then somebody asked if you guys have seen the orchard orioles on top of Fredericks Hill, and are they recorded as part of your study?
Yes, in fact, that's always a thrilling, even though we know they're there and we usually, not usually, but often will see them. It's exciting to have them. They're there throughout the breeding season. I don't know that anyone has identified a nest. I don't believe from our monitor group that we have, but since they're there, presumably they are breeding in that area. And I believe that's been fairly consistent for quite a bit. But yeah, I've seen them mostly on the on the east side of Frederick Hill, as you get a little bit more into the wooded area.
Yeah, we have, because I have this giant spreadsheet from all the checklists of monitors. So I can tell you that they were seen on 25 different days and for a total of 41 birds. I can also go back and look at if the number of orchard orioles was bigger later on in the season, which means that we're seeing some fledglings. I don't know that offhand though right now, but it's great because we can answer those questions in the database.
Great. So then people are asking questions about, do you record directly onto a smartphone in the field right into eBird? And I think some of your colleagues are responding, but I don't know if you want to talk about if you have a protocol for how to take data.
Birders have developed their own ways of recording. eBird, as I said, was developed in the 1990s. I know some really fabulous birders in Wisconsin and elsewhere who continue with their own plan for recording the birds that they see and don't feel any particular need to use eBird. There are, for eBird though, there are two ways to record. And one is that there is an app that's on a phone, on your phone, where you can rather easily mark the birds as you're going along, or you could do it in a notebook or however you want to record it and then do it on your computer later. In fact, for our group, we had some individuals who didn't want to get into the weeds of eBird and would just hand over their record to one of us, and then we could put it into eBird. So there are a lot of different ways of getting it, and they're all pretty straightforward if you like it one way or the other.
Okay, great. Thanks. You're getting some, thank you very much for all your good work comments. And we're at 7:30 now, so I think we should stop for now. And I'm going to put up the poll. We're just going to take a break. I don't know, Janet and Deb, if you can hang around, if there might be some more questions, but I want to give people an opportunity to leave if they can. So I'm going to put the poll up, and you can respond anonymously, and I'd love to know what you want to do regarding meetings in the future. So please let me know. That would be great. And with that, I just want to say thank you again, Janet and Deb, for your time tonight and for this incredible project. It's valuable not only to the Conservancy, but I think to many of the prairies in the area and the land managers. And I hope people, listen and learn from you guys. let's see, I got a couple new messages. That's it. And that's all I have for tonight.
Yeah.
So I put in the chat one more time, links to the feedback form and other things I've referred to in this presentation. And I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about our Conservancy days.
Thank you all.
Thank you.